Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 132. We are joined today by a fantastic guest all the way from Pittsburgh in United States, a returning guest who I will introduce you to in a second. But before I do, I will just check in with the usual hosts of the podcast. Mr. Peter Lantz over in Bath. How are you doing, sir?
I'm all right. Thanks.
Short and sweet, lovely. Okay.
Yeah. Out for a nice. I think I did a six-hour walk with the boy yesterday, and he's not well this morning, so bless him. But there you go. You know, I think I've broken the dog.
Okay.
I've knackered a spaniel. There you go. There you go. Innit?
I'm sure he'll be back on it again tomorrow. And
he's still on it. He's not well, but he's still on it. It's honestly, if I was like him when I wasn't well, it would be great. But, you know,
isn't that a northern euphemism? Knackered a spaniel.
Probably. I don't know.
And Mr. Paul Bassett, how are you doing, sir?
I'm all right. It's very cold in London, so I feel like an old lady wrapped up. I just need some fingerless gloves and a tea cozy.
You need a hat, is what you need.
I do need a hat.
You've got no hair, and that's where you lose most of the heat from your body, isn't it?
That is true. But I'm in good company. You two can on my side. There's no beards. On your side of the Zoom call, there's beards. Okay. I prefer to be on this side.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to remind you, but I've said it a couple of weeks ago. I've got no fillings. I've got all my own teeth. I don't wear glasses and all that. I think I'm doing all right.
It's just your marbles that are gone.
Still got hair. Yeah. I've just lost my mind.
And our guest all the way from America, from Pittsburgh, like I said, is Director of Education for Strongfirst, Mr. Brett Jones. How are you doing, Brett?
Fabulous. Looking forward to the conversation today, and it's great to be on the podcast again. And I think I saw you in October of last year, didn't I?
You did, yeah. We were in at Lilleshall for the SFG one last October. I was assisting, and you were obviously leading the certification. And I'm back there this October with, I think, Sean Cairns is leading this October, and I'm going to be assisting there. And in a couple of months, I'm hosting the SFB with John Engham at my place. I've not met John before, so that's going to be really good. So yes. Awesome. Yeah, no, that was fantastic. So for the listeners who are listening now, Brett has been on before, and it was way back episode 44. Like I say, today is episode 132. So I would really recommend, if you haven't listened to the first episode with Brett, go back and listen to episode 44, because we really kind of cover kind of Brett's origin story and career and kind of progression through, and we're not going to kind of go back and start from scratch again today. We're going to kind of look at more recent stuff that Brett's been working on and move forward. So if you haven't listened to episode 44, then go back and listen to that before you listen to this one. And today we're going to kind of probably go off in lots of different tangents and things with the conversation, but the kind of the main thing I want to kick off with is I'm holding up, if you're watching on YouTube, Iron Cardio, which is a shiny cover that I've had on there, so you might not be able to see it, but it's Brett's latest book, and it's a kettlebell strength and conditioning protocol. I won't go into too much about it, but we're going to kind of obviously talk about that. And also some of the themes, I've got some notes, some of the themes that are brought up with that protocol, and then also just things probably for general training that Brett is obviously massively experienced, massively experienced, educated, well-regarded, traveled the world teaching this sort of stuff. So we'll definitely be able to help us unpack some of the kind of concepts and things that the bigger picture that we can talk about as well. So Brett, before we kind of to kind of kick us off today, like I say, we kind of in the first podcast we kind of talked a lot more about where you've come from and your progression to where you were probably was over a year ago. I think we spoke. So now with Iron Cardio, do you want to kind of explain to us a little bit about what it is, why you came up with it, the kind of the background story to it, and all the rest of it, and we can kind of jump in with questions and things as we go, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So after Pavel and Alexei Senart had an article in 2014 called Strength Aerobics, a powerful alternative to HIIT. And it kind of laid out the basic kind of what I call the classic protocol, where it was clean press, squat, set the bell down, shake it off. The next arm, clean press, squat, set it down, shake it off, set a timer for 20 minutes or so and just keep going. That actually became part of my training pretty shortly thereafter. I kind of thought that sounded like a good idea. But as I joke in the book, nobody sends me programs to experiment with or to run for them because they know I'm not going to follow them. I just don't. I tweak it. I'll tell them what I did with it, but I won't follow the protocol exactly. I kind of followed Quick and the Dead when we were researching that, and the book came out, and that was a 5-year journey for Pavel to come out with Quick and the Dead. And somebody asked me the other day, they're like, "Well, you never did? I've never seen you do Quick and the Dead." I'm like, I was doing Quick and the Dead before Quick and the Dead was a thing. Like, it was the 033 protocol and the 044 protocol, and I wasn't posting my training at that point, but partially because I was testing things that we didn't want out in the public yet. Back to Iron Cardio. So strength aerobics became part of my training, and the recommendations in the original article were to use a 10 RM military press bell. And, it was something that was meant to be light and something that you could keep a good pace going. I always wanted a little bit heavier in my practice. So I would work with a 36 kilo or a 32 kilo, and I would do a variety of things. And what I started to do was just build out different versions of this. Well, fast forward a few years, as you guys know, I'm coming up on my 3-year mark from the end of my cancer treatment. I just passed my 3-year mark from my diagnosis on February 20th. And when I started and returned to training after cancer, and cancer was rough, to put it mildly. And I lost over 40 pounds during the course of treatment. And, initially when I started back to training, I'm like, I'll set the base again with a little bit of body weight training. And I figured out pull-ups are going to be great. Like, I was 205 before treatment. Here I am at 164. I'm like, pull-ups are going to be great. They weren't. I was very, very weak, very, very weak at the end of this. I mean, I had restarted my training many times, but this was truly restarting my training from a very low base. And then I said, well, let's go swings and get-ups. I'll just go back to the classic kind of simple and sinister. What I realized was I wasn't strong enough for ballistics. That sort of load and what happens during swings, I wasn't ready for it. And so I went, well, let's go back to so-called strength aerobics. And so I started with the 24 kilo. Kind of made it through 20 sets. And when I say 20 sets, that's 10 each arm, 20 total. I just like the numbers to be bigger, honestly. You can count your sets any way you want, but I liked the idea of saying 60 sets versus 30 sets. So that's kind of where I started, and I started with kind of the classic protocol. But then I started building out all of these different variations that I lay out in the book. And in the book, I call it Choose Your Own Adventure, because at certain points in my training, I've completed a session, and then I go back to look at what did I do the last time I did this session? Well, I had to go back a year in my training log to find this exact session that I had just completed. That's a lot of variation. So I love oxymoronic statements, and I think, Iron Cardio can be consistently variable and has consistent themes, yet wide variations on those themes. And so Fast forward, people started asking me, you going to put out any information on this? And I'm like, that's a great idea. And so I put together the book, and here we are, talking about iron cardio.
Mm.
And the name actually came from a student who sent in his training log, and he had noted, iron cardio, da, 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 da. And I'm like, wait a second. Did you mean strength aerobics? He's like, yeah, my old boxing coach, we used to call it iron cardio days. And I'm like, I am absolutely stealing that. I gave him credit in the book, but like that name was like, I love it because it's a little clickbaity, right? It's like iron cardio. Oh, what's that? And whatever the case may be. And exercise physiologists all over the planet went, no, that's not what we're talking about. So it succeeded on many levels.
And just the for people who don't, I mean, most people will be listening to this podcast will have listened to us talking about kettlebells over the years and various things. So you doing, for example, if we take the classic, which is, a clean, a press, a squat, put it down, fast and loose, shake off, and then same on the other side, and repeating for, say, a set amount of time or a set amount of sets. Why do you think that worked so well for you and was so appropriate for where you were coming from at that kind of, like you said, that very, very low base of, having had cancer and treatment and having lost 40 pounds and feeling like, you'd lost the majority of your strength, and you're obviously very deconditioned and all the rest of it. So what is it about that kind of method of training you think that is so good for and powerful for when you wanted it?
So right off the bat, like rebuilding that strength base. As I said, I wasn't strong enough for ballistics. And when we look at the kettlebell ballistics and the kettlebell swing, and I've been on a force plate, and the numbers that were given to me is that I was producing 3 to 3.5 times body weight eccentric load at the bottom of a 2-arm swing. That's a big number. That's a lot of load to be taking through the system. Pardon me. And I just wasn't strong enough to handle that load. And I've joked for years, I'm strong enough to hurt myself. I know how to produce strength and summate my strength, whether it was bending nails or my previous powerlifting or, whatever my experience was in the past. Like I know how to use my body to produce strength. I wasn't strong enough to do that. My tissues were deconditioned, to your point. So I needed to reset my strength base. But being at such a deconditioned level, I wasn't ready to take on what we would maybe call more traditional strength training and start doing a 5x5 protocol and start, loading myself with a volume or anything like that. So single reps really succeeded. So pop it up in a clean, good press, good squat, eventually throwing a snatch in and, different things like that. So it really just allowed me to reset my strength base, and it allowed me to accumulate volume. Quick story. There's a restaurant, and that's a generous term, in Roanoke, Virginia, where I grew up, called the Texas Tavern. And the Texas Tavern is an old, like White Castle burger shop. If you know what a White Castle burger shop is, it's a steel bar, but dented, beat up countertop, 10 stools. White Castle little burgers, something that was generously called chili. And the nickname is Roanoke's Millionaires Club. And it's down in the theater district. And literally at 2 a.m, you've got a couple dressed to the nines that just came out of a theater performance. You've got a cop, 2 drunk college students, a homeless person, and this cornucopia of society. And there's a line out the door of people that are waiting to get in. And there's a sign up in the back corner says, we can serve 1,000 people, 10 at a time. Well, I can get 100 presses in, 1 at a time. And so, my mindset was, I'm just going to accumulate volume in singles. And it worked really, really well. And then I just started being creative. How can I add a twist to this? I originally called it rotating twos, and then it was renamed by a student who said traveling twos. He's like, yeah, the 2 just kind of travels through the sequence. I'm like, brilliant. Totally stealing that. And so, it started this experimentation of just what can I do with this? and staying true to the basics of the protocol.
And so would you think that this is a good program or a good system, a good protocol for novices and beginners, because of the way you kind of, you said you're starting. Obviously there needs to be, the other thing that's great about it obviously is that because you're never getting anywhere near fatigue if you select the weights properly, and you're you've said before, and like lots of the Strongfirst kind of principles of, you're practicing, aren't you? You're honing a skill, so you're not kind of approaching fatigue. You're fresh when you do each one, so everything should be good technique. So is this something that you think is quite a good kind of beginner's protocol for people to learn skills and build volume and build strength and that sort of thing?
100%. One of the biggest things we see, especially with people who have a repetition mindset, meaning I'm going to do 10 reps, I'm going to do 8 reps, I'm going to do whatever, is they do whatever it takes to get to that number. One is the loneliest number, but it's also, it's a number that you can focus on. And so, a single clean followed by a press, followed by a squat, allows you to really focus on each one of those techniques. The cheat clean works really well here. So if you're struggling, if it is a newer student, you can cheat clean. If you're having trouble with your press, you can push press. If you're squatting, you can limit your depth, and there's all kinds of ways that you can use the protocol. So I think this succeeds across the spectrum of beginner, intermediate, advanced, because you can always, I learn something every time I pick up a bell. I'm doing something and feeling or learning something about a clean every time I do it, the press every time I do it. And there's things I'm working on constantly to build my own technique. So I think it succeeds over a variety of skill levels.
No, it's great. And I think I did recently the SFL with Jason Marshall over here in November. And like you say, I mean, you've obviously been doing, I think you've been training with kettlebells for 20 years now, or 20 plus years. And it's amazing how sometimes you might be given a cue, or you might be told something, but it's maybe 5 years later that well, for me anyway, I won't speak for everyone, but 5 years later, I'll do something and I'll think, God, that felt really good. And you've been told it years ago, but you've just never kind of pieced it together, and it's never really connected in that way. So it might be something on the bench press, or something with the deadlift setup, or sorry, Pete, you were going to.
I was going to say, I say that to my guys all the time, especially when they start with me. I'm like, in the first session, trying to teach them a swing if they're ready and all of that. And I'm like, remember I said that. I'm like, write that down, or remember I said that, because you'll ask about that in a month's time, or 2 months' time, or a year's time, or whatever it is. Or a guy today, he's had a dodgy shoulder and stuff like that, but he's 6'1" and he's big and he's strong, but he's had a sore shoulder. He put a 12-kilo bell above his head, and it was a bit of a struggle, but he got it above his head. And I was like, Mark, it's the 23rd of sorry, in podcast land, it isn't. It's 2 weeks ahead. But anyway, it's whatever day it is. I was like, write that down and remember that 12 felt hard, because you're going to look back on that and it'll be, you'll see you'll know that the progress is there. So yeah, I fully identify with that. There's loads of things, and I'm like, I remember someone saying that about 3 or 4 years ago, and now I get it.
And now it just suddenly clicks and it just changes. Yeah.
Well, that's why we need to practice over and over again, isn't it? Like what Brett's just said, every time you pick up a bell, you're like, yes.
Well, that's what we do on the Amazing 12 at the end, on the graduation workout. It's a demonstration of all the work that's culminated over the previous 12 weeks, and they end up using weights that previously would have been extremely challenging, and a density of training that would have been extremely challenging. And it's not to say it isn't challenging at the time, it's uncomfortable, but it's something that they would never have ever been able to tackle in any way, and then take a photo shoot and smile at the end of it. So it's good to have those benchmark kind of workouts where you kind of you put a notch, a bit like when you're a kid, you put a notch on the wall, how tall you are, so you can see progression over time.
So what I've written down a few things, Brett, which I kind of took from the book, which I thought were really interesting, kind of topics that obviously relate specifically to iron cardio, but also relate, if we zoom out a bit, relate to probably people's training and lifestyle in general. And And the first thing was the kind of the like you said, the yin and the yang, and the kind of juxtaposition between sort of intuitive training, or it could be intuitive training or intuitive diet or whatever, but intuitive versus structured, and that kind of art versus science, which I think is really interesting. And I love the way we've had Fabio on twice. And I know that in the book you kind of clearly say, and he says himself, I think maybe even in the foreword, that he is a structured guy. He's a science guy. He plans the work, and then he does the plan. Where you kind of you're far more artistic and intuitive, and you do the work and then you record the work. So it's kind of those two positions. So is there oh, and I think I know, well, I don't really know the answer, but it's an interesting discussion. But is there a right and a wrong, and is there is there there's various times in the year where, like Dan John talks about park bench workouts and bus bench workouts, and the different and different seasons and that sort of thing. I mean, how does that kind of fit for you?
Well, I'm going to go all over the place here, because if I talk about myself specifically, I have no goal. And I know that sounds weird, and people out there are like, no, you have to have a goal. You don't. I want to train, and I want to train. I don't have to train. I don't need to train. I want to train. So for me, this is brushing my teeth. This is just what I do. I want to train. And I think there's so many people that either have trouble defining a goal, or they accomplish a goal and then they don't know where to go. They're always hunting that next goal. Well, the goal is to train, because as we get to drive this meat suitcase around the universe, and part of doing that is we need to physically stimulate it. We need to train, especially in today's society where manual labor is, not something that a lot of us do on a regular basis. So for me, I have no goal. My goal is to train. And so guess what? Anything works in that situation, right? Now, if I was preparing for a powerlifting meet, if I was headed towards, I was beginning a kettlebell journey, and I was headed towards a Strongfirst level 1 certification, and I have days where I need to be ready for something, I'm gonna more structure my training. I've done some powerlifting, I've done some things like that, and when the event is, what you would like to be able to do at that time, you count backwards, you structure your training to get yourself there. So it does depend on what's going on. So I'm in a blissful position right now where I have no goal. I just enjoy training. So for me, training is an expression of what small amount of creativity I do have within myself. And that's one of the areas that I express that. It's the hobby, it's the thing that I do. Fabio has some potential goals that he's kind of working towards. So he has a very structured approach. And I think even when he's done having goals, he'll probably still keep a structured approach, because he's the scientist. He's the person that wants to know what's coming. And I was listening to one podcast with him. He's like, I haven't missed a workout since 96. I'm like,
94. It was
94.
August 94. I know the date was imprinted on my brain. I'm sure it was August 94. Because he said it a few times.
Yeah, I've had to reschedule. I've moved a session, but I've not missed a session. And I'm like, I can't count the number of sessions I've missed between then and now. So it's really different. And I think that it is a journey. And one of my students and friends and people that I work with and has really embraced kind of this intuitive training approach, has tried to use it with his students. And he's come back and said, you got to get to a certain point before you're ready for this. And there's a lot of that I agree with. You got to know the colors before you can really paint. Although Jimi Hendrix would disagree, because Jimmy didn't know anything about music, but created some of the best guitar work that's ever been done. So I think it's partially personality. Like I said, I don't follow programs. I just tweak and do and experiment and have fun with what I'm doing. I think that's the other thing. Training's fun for me. And although some of it may be standing in the same place for extended periods of time and doing repetitive movements, that's still fun to me. So I think there's personality involved here. There's perspective. There's whether you have a goal or not, that all come into play. But I think for the scientist, for the structured trainee, experimenting with some intuition can lead to some breakthroughs. And if you're the all intuitive person, following some structured programs, really it gives you a better blueprint to start to experiment again with.
So yeah, I think you kind of touched on it there, where you said, do you think you need, because you obviously got incredibly strong, a few years back, or I don't know how many years, when I've seen, your old highlight reels on YouTube and things, where you're juggling a 48 and you're pressing and you're shutting the captains of crush, and you just ridiculously strong. So did you get that strong initially through structure, or through intuition, or through a bit of both? Or obviously genetics maybe plays a small part, but we don't want to kind of say that, because you've obviously you've trained all your life, so to get that strong, was that on purpose? Was that kind of a goal at the time then, looking backwards? Or
it's interesting because kettlebell training allowed me to enter into grip training at a very high level, or a higher level than I think most people would. I could close the Captains of Crush #2 the first time I tried the Captains of Crush grippers. I'd bent a 60 penny nail the first time I tried. So I came into grip training at a pretty good strength level because of kettlebell training. Now, I'd always been good at pull-ups. I was the kid that was always, I wrestled, and I was kind of the stronger kid. I wasn't the most skilled kid on the mat, but I was fairly strong and could outbench most of the football team in high school, even though I was a wee little guy. I think I graduated high school at about $150. So, I wasn't a big kid. But I think kettlebell training allowed me to enter in. And, initially with kettlebell training, a lot of it was intuitive. We were figuring this stuff out, 21 plus years ago when I got my first kettlebell. It was like, what am I going to do with this thing? And you just kind of figured it out as you went. Grip training was very intuitive. It was, I would bend until I was tired and stop, sort of thing. That one bent, that one didn't. That's it for today. So there was an intuitiveness to that style of training. And then as I transitioned more into powerlifting, that's when I really started using a little bit more of a structured approach, and knowing that I think and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, my last powerlifting meet, I used a Ryavennikov squat cycle. And I had used the Russian squat routine for my deadlift. I'm not recommending that. I'm not saying that was the smartest thing to do. And it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do to run 2 of those cycles back to back. So I spent 12 weeks doing a very high volume deadlift routine, added 50 pounds to my deadlift. I mean, there were some good results out of that. However, it was tough. So I've followed some structured routines. But there was always this blend of kind of this intuitiveness that came through with it.
What I love what you said earlier about not necessarily having goals and you train because you want to train. It's funny because if you asked someone why do you brush your teeth? Why? What answer are they going to give? They go, well, I don't want all my teeth to fall out. It's like, well, there you go then. So why do you train? Oh, because I want to look like this or whatever. It's like, no, because I want to train because I just want to be stronger and fitter and healthier. And it's an interesting question because you can't really ask that about, why do you eat? Well, you eat for energy, but then people can then get obsessed with eating or not eating or obsessed with a certain type of diet and stuff like that. But brushing your teeth is just one of the, you probably can get obsessed with it, but most people will brush their teeth twice a day, not obsessed. They just do it because they do it.
Well, most hobbies, I mean, I'm not saying that fitness is a hobby, it can be, but no one says, what's your goal playing guitar? People play guitar, it's like, well, I'm hoping that, one day at the age of 45, someone's going to see me play my local pub and give me a record deal. No one's gonna. Could happen. But we kind of try and find these big things when it comes to fitness. I don't know if that's because there's an internal struggle. I mean, ultimately, like playing guitar is quite. I mean, it might be pleasurable for you. It's not pleasurable for other people when you're learning, but certainly for yourself.
That's why you need to learn the bagpipes, because you can't tell. You can't tell if you're learning or not, because it sounds the same.
I think there's key instruments that are perfect for a beginner, and that's the recorder, the violin, the drums, and the bagpipes. I think with them as a combination, you certainly, yeah. But anyway, yeah. So I've lost my train of thought now, but essentially, I think, it's quite pleasurable to learn those things. You can tootle about, learn some songs, blah blah blah. But for other people, it's not so fun. But when it comes to training, it's quite it's kind of uncomfortable. It's rare that you finish a workout saying that was pleasurable, in a traditional sense. I mean, it was worthwhile. It might have been fun. There may have been some adrenaline there. But I think when you really train, it does get uncomfortable in a way.
But I think we should. There's pleasure in that.
I think there is, but
exactly, and I think that when we look at, and I'll speak more specifically for the U.S., but we've exported our problems to many other corners of the world, so it is a decent foil. You look at the health, lifestyle, and related health issues. Weight, obesity, things like that. We know we should be exercising, yet very few people do it. There's a Jim Gaffigan joke where he's like, I went to the gym and I saw all these fit people, and I'm like, you did it. You can go home now. You're done. You can leave. Totally missing the point, because for most people, it's a weight loss goal. It's an aesthetic goal. You are doing X to look like Y. We have to move beyond that. We have to move beyond that if we are going to motivate, again, specifically for the US, only 20% of the population has a gym membership. Now, notice I didn't say exercises. I said only 20% of the population has a gym membership, because the number of people that actually go is way lower than that. So the number of people that are using the most powerful medicine we have available to ourselves, beyond our nutrition, our hydration, and managing stress and getting sleep, is exercise. And we're not using it. When we're not using it because people think you only do it to look a certain way. We have to move beyond that, because maintaining the physical body, which is so much a part of maintaining the mind and maintaining your whole self, has to be something that's pleasurable. It has to be something that people want to do. And it can't be something that's transitory. Well, I'm losing 20 pounds so I can look good at this wedding. Okay, that's great. I'm not taking anything away from that goal. Fantastic. But what are you going to do for the other, hopefully 70 some odd years of your life? Like you need to be managing this machine. So, and then from a mental aspect, I think some people resonate with this idea, and I've done this on a few different podcasts. Close your eyes. Everybody listening at home, close your eyes, and I want word association game, right? Fitness, fit, what popped into your head? Well, for you guys, it's probably something positive, right? Something popped in your head, and you thought about either a goal you want to accomplish or had accomplished. You thought about
I'll go, Robbie.
Yeah. So now think about the person who was bullied by an athlete in school. Think about somebody that had a really bad experience with a phys ed teacher or a coach. Think about somebody that was mocked, bullied, made fun of for their appearance, or for even trying to get fit, and they were mocked and bullied for it. Some people have a really negative, deep-seated mental response to this idea of being fit, of being strong. That's an even worse one. Close your eyes and do the word association game with strength or strong. That's not a positive, for me, super positive association. Like I have things that come up in my head that are super positive. That's not the case for a variety of folks. So I think that acknowledging that, being able to give voice to that and say, I've restarted my exercise routine 50 times in my life because I hate exercise. because I was bullied, because I had this bad experience, because whatever the case may be. Well, now let's move beyond that. You've acknowledged it. You've given it voice. Well, now let's find something you enjoy, and let's move forward with that. Yeah, I enjoy training.
That's massive. I had a chat with Ben Morris, friend of the show, on WhatsApp this morning. He sent me an article yesterday, and it's about how exercise, any sort of like walking, cycling, lifting weights, anything, obviously helps you physically, but it helps you mentally as well, and it can stave off dementia and like Parkinson's and all sorts of like neurological conditions and all of that. And it was funny because I said, I think most of us know, I mean, we know that, but I think most of us in the wider world know that. So it's not necessarily new information, but know it's good for you. But for people looking for coaches, say, they look for people to motivate them. And it's like, it's not about motivation. It's about finding the answer within yourself of why you want to train. So that's what you're talking about. It's like, because you see the aesthetics, I want to lose weight, I want this, I want that. It's like, yeah, but what do you really want? Because it's not just that. And I've been looking into the neurology of it, and your brain is so we can say to people, like that article, I could share it on Facebook, Twitter, whatever you share it on, and people will read it and go, yeah, I know that information. But you've got to believe it, and your brain only believes, well, it only listens to what you tell it. So I can tell someone, this is good for you, this is good for you, you should be doing this, you should be, and they go, yeah, okay, and it's just noise. Because your brain says, well, okay, but I'm telling you this, and it might be telling you something completely different. And then your brain believes you and only you, and it believes that to be the absolute truth. So that is exactly what you just said there, Brett. And I think you said it on the last podcast as well about especially strength and people that can have a negative effect on people straight away. And it's changing that belief within the person rather than go, no, strong's good. You can say that as much as you like, but the person's got to believe that. And I find that fascinating. And I said that to Ben, and I said, this is part of the problem, because you can share all this information and it's all there and it's all available. And it's, we've got more information available than we've ever had, yet we've gone in the opposite direction. So I haven't got a question there or anything. I just wanted to say that because it's a huge point. And this is what we struggle with as coaches all the time, I think, of finding ways to get people to find it within themselves to look after themselves, basically.
Yeah. Simon Sinek, start with why. And then go a layer deeper and start with what are your current feelings, beliefs, triggers, related to this thing that you want to take on.
You mentioned the Jim Gaffigan thing. I've recently just watched all of his stand-ups on Netflix. I'd not seen him before, and I think he's got about 4 or 5 sort of specials on Netflix, and I've watched them all. And the thing you said about when he goes into the gym and says you can go, you don't need to be here, is really funny, because I shared a thing from James Clear yesterday from Atomic Habits in my kind of Facebook group for my members and stuff, and it was exactly that. He said, but he said the fact that you go to the gym, even though you don't need to, is why you don't need to, And then he says the fact that you save when you could spend is why you have money to spend. So he says your habits create your strength, so it's exactly that point, isn't it?
Discipline equals freedom. I mean, you can throw it in a Jocko Willenick direction, and these are consistent themes. And I love that you touched on this. I know I should sort of aspect of human knowledge, right? Because all of us, I know I should go to bed. I shouldn't do that next episode on whatever show that I'm binging. I shouldn't eat this. I shouldn't. And yet we do it anyway. And nobody always or nevers. That's an old quote, and I think that we fall into those traps of I always do this or I never do this. Well, I was having a conversation with a student the other day, and I've been working with this person for a while, and they said, well, I haven't trained in like a year. And I'm like, whoa, I've been working with you during that time. Like, I know you've been training. What do you mean you haven't been training for a year? And it hit this person where they're like, yeah, why'd I say that? I'm like, I don't know. But you've clearly been training. Yeah. And so those always and never sort of messages that we get into our brain, or our expectations, or what we think we should be doing, like those are things to kind of peel apart a little bit and to look into. But yeah, it's a deep well.
One other thing I wanted to talk about was it's something I think I shared something again a week or two ago about boredom, and you kind of touch on it in the book. And I was going to kind of address the bigger kind of point, I suppose, of minimalist training and boredom, or people's perception of boredom, because there was a quote I saw and it said something like, have the courage to not get bored, and I think people throw we spoke about this maybe last week, Pete, didn't we, on the podcast, or I might have been having a conversation with someone else, I think, and someone sort of said, oh, you asked the guy to do a set of 20 or something, and they said,
I'll
get bored.
He gets bored doing 25 swings. I'm like, it takes you like 40 seconds.
Yeah.
But is it number 10 or 12 that they get bored? Is it 13? I mean, which number?
I don't
Because
know.
I mean, I think I for the last 64 weeks I've been following a very, very structured program, and I've been following something very, very structured, and I can honestly say I've never been bored, that word of bored, but I can see how we've spoke about this before, where I think people use the term bored as a get out of doing something, because they sort of say, well, I'm bored of that because it's maybe getting too hard and they want to switch and do something different to distract themselves. I mean, you do mention boredom in the book, and how, results aren't boring, and maybe, yeah. So I suppose there's a few things. So we've got minimalist sort of programs, and you've mentioned already sort of Simple and Sinister and The Quick and the Dead. And I suppose, would iron cardio come under a minimalist kind of program? I probably would say it's less minimalist than the other two, but there's more variety, I would say, than the other two. But yeah, what do you think is going on there with current, I suppose it's current attention levels and Instagram, and everything's got to look amazing, and you've got to be doing fantastic things that look great online and that sort of thing. But the basics and minimalism and boredom, kind of, can we maybe have a little talk around that?
100%. As far as minimalism goes, I mean, let's baseball. You catch the ball, you throw the ball, you hit the ball, and you run. Those are the 4 things that you're going to do, and you can play baseball for the rest of your life. Tennis, you're going to serve, you're going to hit a forehand, you're going to hit a backhand, you're going to run around the court. Boxing, there's 4 punches. Like, that's it. Yet there's tremendous variation between how those things happen, but you're still doing just those things. Olympic weightlifting, you're going to clean the bar, you're going to jerk the bar, you're going to snatch the bar. That's what you're going to try to get good at for the next 10, 20, whatever years. If you're playing guitar, your basic chords are your basic chords. Like, you're going to be playing those chords for a lifetime.
12 notes. That's it.
Yeah. And so and I always use the analogy with boxing, there's 4 punches, yet out of that comes the sweet science of boxing. And there's tremendous variation, because now you add footwork and you add what the opponent's doing to you. My joke now with all of my students is no plan survives contact with the enemy, and you are the enemy.
I'm going to use that one.
I'm going to nick that. We're allowed to nick things, considering
100%.
It seems like your students wrote your book for you, but there you go.
They had a big part in it. But I think that when we change the perspective on exercise from entertainment to practice, and we look at these things as skill development and we look at our results over time. I love with my students going, remember when we did this with a 12 and it was really hard? You're now using a 24 kilo.
Yep.
Like, that's a big deal. And so you remind people of this journey that they've been on. And so boredom is absolutely, it is you use the term cop out or an excuse to stop doing something that you're not having fun with. That's a different conversation. That's a totally different conversation. And if we can be open about that conversation, we can start to find, ways around that. I do have students that have never touched a kettlebell. So, don't sit here and think that I have. Now, the other 99.9% have definitely used a kettlebell. But
always just throw it at them.
They got to catch it. It's either you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
I watched that about 3 days ago for the first time and I was amazed that that's 19 years old, and we watched
and
it
stands up.
Yeah, it's still there's a scene in there with Lance Armstrong that doesn't stand up quite so well, but it is a good film. It's a very good film. Yeah.
Well, anybody that thought he wasn't was fooling themselves. That's just anybody. Anyway, totally different podcast. So to that subject of boredom, I think if you flip that script and you say, this is practice, this is learning your chords on a guitar, this is learning the skill of throwing a pitch, and you kind of boil it back down into these things that you're going to practice for a lifetime. I have the quote in the book, I can't remember the name, but it's a famous cellist who at 92 years old was still practicing. And somebody asked him, like, why are you still practicing at 92? And he's like, yeah, because I think I'm starting to make some progress. Like, I think I'm actually learning something now. That is where we need to get to from a physical practice standpoint. And like I said, I will go a year before I repeat some of the sessions that I put together. That's a lot of variety. If you're getting bored, you lack imagination.
Yeah.
Well, it was it. Metallica said, which song is it? I can't remember which song. Boredom sets into the boring mind.
Well, I'm reading a book at the moment. It's about a guy it's about comfort. And we all live in comfort. We've had it's better now than it's ever been and all that. Yet people still get anxious and scared and all that sort of stuff. And the example he uses is he went hunting in Alaska with a couple of blokes who he knows, and he'd never done it before, and it was getting massively out of comfort for 30 odd days. But he goes on about being bored because he's like, it gets dark early, it gets light a bit later, they're looking for caribou, and that's all they're doing all day. And if there's none there, they're sitting around doing nothing, and you can hear your own heartbeat, you can hear yourself breathing because there's no noise. You can hear birds flying over, you can hear the flap of the wings and stuff like that. And he's like, we don't get bored anymore because there's just too much going on in the world and around us, and there's the phones and stuff like that. So to my mind, as soon as you talk about that, I'm bored of this, it's like, that's because I could be doing something else other than, I'm bored of training because I could be doing something else. And you can always, and then that's when it and I don't like using the term, but that's when it turns up as kind of an excuse, doesn't it? Of, well, I could easily be doing. It's like, yeah, you could be doing millions of other things, So you need to know why.
I think simplicity. I mean, Strongfirst is a good example of simplicity, really, because as an approach, as a kind of system, there is a lot of variety in it, but at the same time, when you look at each individual program and the time that you guys, you talk about timelines differently. You talk about the simplicity of each kind of program that you come up with each certification. The idea is that you're working on certain qualities and to get really good at them. If you take it as a whole, there's a lot of variety there. So someone can come in and they have the confidence they're in a place where they have a path, I think. And then once you have the confidence you're on a path that will take you to a destination that you think is of value, then I think that that need for variation, that need for entertainment starts to disappear. I think you've got to earn that individual's trust. And I think a lot of the stuff out there at the moment, it never really earns a client's trust. It never really earns our trust because there's nothing really it's going to take us to. Whereas someone like Strongfirst, you definitely know there's a big community there who demonstrate that they've had results. There's a lot of conversations around it, and there's a lot of clarity. And there you start believing that this could be possible. I certainly, when I first came across it, I started to believe that there was a path which I'd never come across before.
I love that description, and I wanted to key back in on the boredom aspect and this idea of, this person is in arguably probably one of the most beautiful places, or something that would rank high on beautiful places on the planet to go visit, and yet they feel bored. You be okay. We've run into this situation. If we're not stimulated, equals bored. That's not equal. Not being stimulated does not equal being bored. Be okay being alone. Are there some scary thoughts rattling around in my bowl of gelatin? Yeah. And I've got to be okay being alone with those. And there's a Henry Rollins quote of, "Don't be afraid to be alone with the iron." I think it's Henry Rollins. But that's me. I can show you the footprints in the carpet over here where I do most of my iron cardio sessions or swings or whatever I'm doing. Like, I have footprints dug into my carpet where, it's very easy for me to step into position. And I train alone. Part of that is I don't have friends. Totally other podcast. Very sad story. We're not going to get. We're not going to go.
Brushing your teeth.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing. This is a podcast, been done by a distance. But I've trained alone for 20 some odd years. Part of it was my schedule. My schedule was always a little bit different. Part of it was I was doing kettlebells, which nobody knew what they were early on. I was bending nails and doing weird things. And so, I've trained alone for a long time, and it's totally therapeutic for me. I'm super okay being alone. I'm super okay not being stimulated. And I think that is a worthwhile journey for people to go on. I should be able to go out to a beautiful location or not and sit and be okay. Not having the device running, not having the music going. I go on walks around the neighborhood with no music, no podcast. People think I'm a psychopath because I'm just by myself going on a walk, nothing happening in the ears. That's a worthwhile journey.
I did a 6-hour walk, like I said, with a boy yesterday, with no, I had my phone with me, taking a few pictures and stuff, and that was it. It was great. It was lovely. It was fantastic. So, actually even saw a rainbow at eye level because we were on a hill and it started to drizzle and all that. It was amazing. And you don't get to see stuff like that unless you go out, do you?
Right. And I think it's what I found. We've spoken about this before. When I've been away a few times and I've started not taking my phone on holiday, and I've done 3 weeks without my phone, and even the need to take photos of everything, it's amazing when you actually, because a few times you think, oh, I'll take a photo of that. I haven't got my phone. Okay, I won't take a photo of it. But it's like I've just got into the habit of we kind of take photos of everything, don't we? And we've got the device here, and if we want to check something, and when you actually get away, I mean, it's not long ago that we didn't have mobile phones. 20 years ago, I didn't have a mobile phone, and it's only in the last 20 years that everyone's got this phone attached to them the whole time. But it seems now that life without it, I think most people would really struggle, including myself on a day-to-day basis for what we use, But
I think about this a lot because I think I could take a photo of that. And then I'm like, what am I going to do with it? What am I going to do with that photo? Seriously. So, and then the other thing is magical sunsets, right? And I take photos of them and post them. They never look as good on a picture, especially on as good as iPhones and Samsungs and all that. Or the photograph is never as good as the actual thing. And the sun sets every day. So if you want to see it, you can just go out at sunset and more often, like unless it's really cloudy or something and you don't see it, but sometimes when it's wispy clouds and that, it makes it more dramatic and all of that. So it's different every day, but it sets every day. And the day that it doesn't, we won't be here anyway, will we? So, you know, and it's no, but it's things like that. And to bring it back to training, that's the kind of thing, isn't it? It happens every day if you do it, or every couple of days or whatever. So if like and it doesn't have to be magical every time. It just, as long as it keeps happening, there'll be good ones and bad ones and stuff. And you know, it's yeah, that's the way I think of it anyway.
Do mate. Right.
And it never looks as good on video as it does in your head.
No, they never do. Yeah.
Did you find the leprechaun at the bottom of the rainbow?
No. I tried to. I found a box of Lucky Charms though.
You're on some council estate.
Another thing we Americans have ruined. You're welcome. No, I think we dove down some pretty good philosophical rabbit holes here, and you know, there's obviously deeper layers to hopefully most everything that we do, and I circling back on this idea of just practice, of a lifelong pursuit, and treating something like training as a practice and a lifelong pursuit is a worthwhile journey for anybody. And I think that's something like my job as a coach is to set up the guardrails for safety and hopefully direction to where we want you going, and then let you ping around the guardrails, create that safe space, as the kids would say nowadays, and let you ping around those guardrails. I think iron cardio as a protocol kind of gives you that ability to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. You know, I've taken myself from this, barely being able to get the 24 moving after my treatment, to where I'm training on a regular basis with a 36 and 40 kilo, and has even tiptoed into having the 44 kilo involved in the training a bit. And so I've rebuilt a decent level of strength and conditioning and performance, and it's all in this idea of practice. And so I think that there's a journey there that's worthwhile.
I think as well, what you've demonstrated, Brett, is that the fact that what you went through and the treatment would have, a lot of people wouldn't have survived it in the first place, and a lot of people would have been their life would have been massively limited afterwards. But your your kind of buffer of strength and your history of training and strength and being resilient up to that point obviously set you in good stead to get over the disease and the treatment, and to come out. And the fact that you're now just a year or two later, you're back pressing a 40 kilo and like all this sort of stuff is I had a slightly separate point, but I've started having some DEXA scans every 6 months just to check on bone density and muscle, and just to see how things are going, just a guy up in London. And he explained it to me that you need to have more muscle density as you get older, because if you do get ill and for some reason you're bedridden for it doesn't need to be very long, 2 weeks or a month, you will lose so much. So you need this kind of this buffer of muscle and this buffer of strength. So to get through, you have that when you come out the other side, whereby it's not good enough just to be just about getting through, because if you do get seriously ill or you have an accident or whatever, you're not, especially after the age of 40, 50, you're not going to recover like you did when you were 20 or 30, are you? So I mean, that you must feel that having that history of strength and training helped you a lot in your recovery. Is that correct?
100%. Two things there. Yes, my training before I went into treatment, I was pursuing Sinister. So I was doing a lot of sessions with the 48 and doing my swings and doing my get-ups, and I was training fairly heavy. So yes, I had a pretty good base level of strength and muscle mass and things like that. Here's the other thing. I was fat. I'll just throw it out there. I was 205 on a towering 5'9" frame. That's not a lot of space to spread out 205 pounds on. And I had a big midsection, and I was heavy. had I not had that tissue to sacrifice, I would have ended up with what they call a peg line, which is a direct feeding tube into the stomach, because they can't go down the throat because you're receiving radiation there. And those are nasty. Like, those are never a good thing to end up with. In fact, with throat cancer 10 years ago, they would have just gone ahead and put the tube in at the beginning of treatment and started feeding me through the tube and kind of given up on the throat. So yeah, I had extra tissue to sacrifice. And that's part of the conversation that, really people that their only pursuit is aesthetic and their only pursuit is a low body fat percentage. When you are truly challenged physically and you need tissue to sacrifice, you want some tissue around to sacrifice, and you'd rather that be some fat than some muscle. And obviously it's a combination. And I look at pictures of myself at the end of treatment, and I have one in particular that pops into my mind. I don't recognize that guy. I look at that picture and I'm like, man, the hell. And so, the idea that having a little bit of body fat, which most people are like, well, it's not a bad thing. And when you end up challenged, it can actually be a part of that buffer. Because we want to talk about that muscle buffer. We want to talk about that strength buffer. There's a body fat buffer that can be there as well, that can really help when you end up really challenged like this.
The same guy we were talking about earlier, who gets bored doing 25 swings, he's 60 years old. He's a rower and a runner and all of that, and so he's getting stronger. He's doing really well, actually. But he every session he'll be doing some swings, and then he'll be going like this with his, checking his belly out just to see if it's like still there. And he hasn't got one. He looks a bit like me, actually. Like, I've got a bit of a one, but like, it's a bit of body fat, but not much. And he keeps talking about it. He's like, he goes, oh, I can feel the muscle underneath him. I can see definition in my arms, and I can feel my abs are there. And he goes, but you just can't see them. And I was like, well, yeah, do you want to be able to see them? And he's kind of like, well, goes, go and admit it. You'd love it, wouldn't you, if you had like that? And I'm like, no. I really don't care. I was like, if I wanted them, I'd have them, because I would go for it, right? And I was saying exactly the same to him. I was like, why do you need it? And I was like, if you want it, that's cool. We'll get you abs, because I'll just tell you to eat less. Basically, because he eats well. You can see that he eats well. And he's of an age when, people kind of do eat well, because they did when they were younger and stuff. So I just say that, I'm like, if you want it, because you're just going to tell me to eat less, aren't you? And I was like, yes. So, and it's kind of, I mean, if he wants it, I'll get him it. But I think that's brilliant. Because I mean, my dad's died of cancer nearly 20 years ago now. And I've watched it eat someone away, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So if you can let it eat a little bit of you away, get over it, and then move on. And obviously we're 20 years down the line, and cancer treatment has moved massively in that time. But yeah, it's not a nice experience. So
I think Brett, you said, yeah. So when you first got ill, you were 205, and then you went down to about 160, 165, and now you're kind of settled at 185. Is that what you kind of say around that kind of 185, 190, something like that? Or
190. I like to think some of that is a little more muscle. I'm not aiming to go back to 205.
No,
and I've got a little extra around the midsection, which I don't mind. And so, but I think settling in around 190, I would argue in some ways I'm stronger than I was before treatment. That, my training was a little not as well balanced as it could have been prior. And I was kind of, I do get laser focused. When I started bending nails, and I wanted to bend the red nail when I was the 11th guy in the world to do that. That is what I did for 6 months. Almost exclusively. Like, I bent nails, and I went from the 60 penny nail to a red nail within about 6 months, and certified on it. When I wanted to squat, I squatted a lot. When I wanted to get sinister, I was swinging the 48 kilo a lot, and making progress in that direction. So I can put the blinders on and go tunnel vision and head in a certain direction, and pursue that aggressively. so I think that settling in where I am now is a good place to be. I feel good. I joke with people now, like, having not felt good, and that's a very generous way of describing cancer treatment. I can tell you that feeling good feels good. And one of the biggest goal in my training and everything that I do to manage myself now is to feel good. But that doesn't mean I like to joke I'm comfort first in a lot of what I do, but I get some good work in, and I enjoy the physical aspect. And so I think it's a worth, I keep saying it's a worthwhile journey, but yeah, it's a worthwhile journey.
Fantastic. No, that's been so good to catch up with you again, Brett, and to talk about things. So for what we'll go through in a minute and find out how people can follow you and find out more about you and follow your training and stuff. But I'll just say that, so Iron Cardio, I just typed in Brett Jones Iron Cardio, and it came up straight away. And you just go in and download as an but I got the ebook, but there's also a course. It includes videos as well, I think, Brett, isn't there, that people can. So if you're not training with if you're not a kettlebell instructor yourself or training with someone who is, then it'd be great to get all the videos as well for the techniques and things explained and shown on video. But it's a really fantastic resource that we're starting to use with our kind of group clients at Unique Results. They don't know they're doing Iron Cardio, they just know they're doing training, but we're starting to lace that into what they're doing, and they're doing really well with it. Pete, is there anything you'd like to say as we kind of start to wrap up?
Do you know what? Not really. It's been great. I've written this down because I might set a goal for it, because apparently it only takes 6 months to bend the red nail. So I'm all over that. I'll start today.
We'll check in September.
Start with a paperclip.
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, I can unravel a paperclip. That'll do.
Paul,
funny.
anything you'd like to say as we start to wrap up?
No, it was an absolute pleasure again speaking to you, Brett. And I like the idea of cardio. I mean, and weights. It's kind of like we often speak about strength training and cardio and endurance being on two sides, like the Montagues and Capulets. They never the twain shall meet. But ultimately, that's the great thing about the kettlebell is that it's such a versatile tool for people. And I think I was thinking while you were talking about how would you rehabilitate your body to generating force, to being able to push, to be able to lift weights. And I was thinking, well, could you go into a strict bodybuilding style thing, but there's something about the kettlebell where there is a real focus on the flow and the movement. And, I think there's a therapy to the way you've kind of structured it. I think not only for the body and the muscles and the joints, but also just for the mind to create some order, probably after a bit of chaos that you were going through. As much as your training was quite varied, there was a kind of chaos to your recovery. I suspect that having this kind of approach gave some therapy to you, which is so it's interesting to see that this kind of system came out of that kind of chaos. Well, thanks for coming on again.
No, thank you. And makes me think we should probably do another podcast and dive deeper into this idea of cardio. What does that mean from a strength training perspective? What does that mean because now we're using strength to achieve peripheral adaptations and some cardiovascular adaptations, but we can take a deeper dive down. What does that actually mean? What is cardio and all of that stuff? And then, setting that strength base and we can chat more about that. But thank you. It's been a pleasure to be on.
No, that would be absolutely fantastic. And I just thought when as you were saying that, Paul, there's a quote that I haven't mentioned. I think we mentioned it before we came on, but there's a quote in the book from the Joker in The Dark Knight around chaos and order, isn't there? So
I'm an agent of chaos.
so if you are a film fan, like I certainly am, there's Brett has a way of weaving quotes into the book. I've got some his quotes from Star Wars, Princess Bride, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Spinal Tap, Dark Knight, all these sort of things, as well as, you know, Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, Lao Tzu, all these people as well. But he's got some great film quotes in there, which is fantastic. So yeah, do please check out Iron Cardio. And Brett, if people don't already, and they want to follow you, just to kind of keep an eye on what you're doing, and I know you put lots of your training on Instagram that I see, a lot of the Iron Cardio stuff on there. What's the best way for people to kind of keep in touch with you and find you online?
So Instagram's really the best way. So Brett Jones SFG is me on Instagram. I have a Facebook page. I have an Applied Strength Facebook page, but I just don't do much with it. Social media is something that I don't necessarily enjoy, but the way it breaks down nowadays is Twitter is where people go to argue, Facebook is where people go to advertise, Instagram is where people go to kind of interact and have some positive interaction, hopefully. So I tend to focus there. I have a website, appliedstrength.com. I put out articles on strongfirst.com, and the forum is someplace where I interact there, the Strongfirst forum. So those are really the best places. The videos that you were talking about, strongandfit.com. They've been fantastic to work with, and you know, there's definitely some good stuff there, but the book and the videos are available on strongandfit.com.
Yeah. Excellent. Fantastic. And yeah, we'll definitely take you up on getting you back on again to delve more deeply into, you know, cardio and strength and the interplay between them and how we can use them to help each other. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brett, for joining us again. Thank you, Mr. Peter Lant.
Hurrah.
He's waving. Thank you, Mr. Paul Bassett.
Bye.
And please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're listening on a platform that allows you to do so. We will be back next week with, we've got Oliver Loom coming on, who's a filmmaker who's just done a documentary called The Summit Mentality. And it's about sport and mental health and a 24 relay race on Mount Snowdon, which I'm going to go and watch on Sunday at a special screening. And we will have the filmmaker on next week to talk about that. So we will see you next week for episode 133. Thank you all for listening, and see you then.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.